Okay, let's get started, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to Entering a Year of Hope, a panel put together by Berlin Cameron and Perksy. My name is Tina Yip, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Culture at Berlin Cameron, a creative agency on a mission to make cultural change. In December 2020, we partnered with research company Perksy to create a report centered around consumer predictions in 2021. From mental health to purchasing behaviors, we uncovered 9 insights that aim to help guide marketers on what to expect this year. With the vaccine rollout, we stepped into the year feeling hopeful. 73% of people believe that 2021 will be better than the last. We were ready for 2021, ready for change. But with the Capitol riot that happened last week and Inauguration Day coming up, frankly, many of us are scared, uneasy, and feeling just a wide range of emotions. But it is moments like these where we must come together to continue to learn, to be compassionate, conscious, and steer our work in the right direction as marketers, leaders, and citizens. 66% of people believe that individuals can make the most impact in 2021. Today's theme is Entering a Year of Hope, and we have gathered experts in media, culture, wellness, and commerce in one room to discuss their perspective on this upcoming year. We hope that you'll be able to gain a new point of view, a deeper understanding on outlooks that could shape our society, or simply reassure a hunch that you've been thinking about. So let's get to it. I'm excited to bring on stage the founder and CEO of Perksy, Nadia Masri, who has been an incredible partner during this whole process. Nadia, come on up.
Thank you, Tina. I wish I had like an actual stage so that I could feel like I was actually coming on stage. I feel like I should have planned this better, you know, put a little platform and like walked on as we would if it weren't a pandemic time. Well, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Nadia. I am a 4-time founder, Forbes 30 Under 30 headliner, and the CEO and founder of Perksy. Perksy is a consumer insights platform that powers real-time, contextual, and in-the-moment research with real and everyday consumers, and a specialty with millennials and Gen Z, through an interactive and gamified mobile app that rewards users for answering questions. How it works is users download the Perksy app and answer these interactive, engaging questions from brands in a format called stacks. We never use the word survey. It's like a gross word for consumers. And for every stack that they answer, they collect points, which they can then redeem at over 100 participating retailers. Using our enterprise platform, we enable top brands and agencies to create bespoke, quantitative and qualitative research campaigns with media-rich content, target precise audiences, and analyze response data in real time. With a typical turnaround time of about 24 hours, Perksy brings hyper-targeted, hyper-local, and contextual insights from real audiences at unprecedented scale to help organizations make better, faster decisions with confidence. Perksy works with some of the world's leading brands and agency networks like Mondelez, Target, Mars, Clorox, Smuckers, IPG, and WPP. So for this particular study, we fielded this survey to about 1,000 Perksy panelists aged 13 to 54, so Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, and nationally representative throughout the US and balanced 50-50 male-female. I always like to provide those stats just for the insights folks out there who love that data. So I'm really, really excited about what we're going to be talking about today. There's a lot of great stuff in here. These are amazing panelists, and I'm excited to just get right into it. So throughout the webinar, at any point, you're more than welcome to jump into the Q&A and hit us up with some questions. We'll try and work them in. Maybe we'll answer some at the end, but we definitely want people's thoughts throughout. And if you have a particular question for a panelist based on something that they're saying, or you'd like us to expand on a particular topic that you find really interesting, feel free to just jump in and we'll take a look. I will do my best to also pay attention to the Q&A. So welcome to 2021 panelists. So I'd love to start by having you all give us a quick intro about yourselves and tell us, what are you personally most excited about in 2021? So let's start with, I'm going to go in order of how people are appearing on my screen. So let's start with you, Jacob.
Hey, thank you. My name is Jacob. I'm the CEO of a media company called Flighthouse, and we're basically the biggest media brand on TikTok. So we have 27 million followers. And I'm most excited this year. I saw that the 1975 aren't doing shows till next year, unfortunately. I was gonna say I'm excited for concerts to hopefully happen. I'm honestly just excited for maybe restaurants at some point, hopefully by the summer to open, because I'm in LA and everything's like closed. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that because I really like going out to dinners and stuff. But yeah, just excited for stuff to hopefully go back to somewhat normal by the end of the year.
Very cool.
Mhm.
Dr. Vinita Sandhu. I love saying your full name.
I know. I was gonna say that's what a title.
I'm sorry, Jake. You just got a Jacob, but you know.
Thanks, y'all. I am Vinita Sandhu. I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm the head of emotional fitness at COA. We are the world's first gym for mental health and believe in making emotional fitness as accessible and common as physical fitness. And to your question, Nadia, about what I'm looking forward to, y'all, I just want hugs. I just want to hug people. I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping that that happens this year.
I will totes hug you. Don't worry. We can. We'll
here for it.
It'll be June 20th. Chana.
Hi everyone, and Vinita, thanks for mentioning hugs. I feel like I just got warm just thinking about potential hugs in 2021. So right on for that. I'm Chana Janelle Ewing. I'm the founder and CEO of Genie, which just launched this past July in the middle of a pandemic and national reckoning on race. So Genie, we're a community-centered beauty marketplace. We enable consumers to discover, shop, and share brands that align with their beliefs. So that's really, we like to say, bringing BIPOC, queer, and women-owned brands to the front. And what else? Oh, I'm also an author of a children's book called An ABC of Equality. And what I'm looking forward to in 2021, well, one, that it is 2021. So like 2020 is over, and I feel like 2020 wasn't, like, actually there was a lot that I learned in 2020. So I'm actually looking forward to seeing how the personal lessons and societal lessons, hopefully how they're more integrated in 2021. Like let's see how quickly we start to move society forward.
Awesome. Beth Ann.
Hi everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Beth Ann Kaminkow. I'm the global CEO of VMLY&R Commerce. And I know some people are on Facebook Live right now joining us there. We were Geometry and now have moved into the VMLY&R family to become WPP's end-to-end creative commerce agency, believing that commerce holds the greatest potential when it comes to creativity today. We'll get into that a little bit later. And for me, look, it's next week, the inauguration. I'm so excited for that, just to mark, I think, a shift and a change in leadership, because I do believe sometimes these things start from the top. And then each of us kind of stepping into that new space and owning the change that's about to come.
Wonderful. And last but not least, Ty.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am Ty Randolph. I am the Chief Operating Officer for two Kevin Hart companies, Laugh Out Loud, a multi-platform comedic entertainment company, where our mission is to keep the world laughing together, and also Heartbeat Productions, his global production company. I'm also the co-founder of Sugarberry, which is a brown mom's guide to the sweet life. I co-founded that company with actress Tika Sumpter, and we focus on content commerce and community that really lives in service of Black and brown moms who are hugely influential, but unfortunately underserved in the marketplace. Super happy to be here. What I'm most excited about for 2021, I think it will be evicting my my coworker, my 2-year-old son, letting him go back to school. It's been fun but tiring sharing a workplace. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. So we're gonna dig right into the content. So we'll start off with sharing, at least one stat and ask some questions around that. And all of this research can be found in the report, which you can find on Berlin Cameron's website. So, first topic is a hopeful 2021. So in our report, 36% of people described the upcoming year as hopeful. And over 73% of consumers think that this year will be a drastically better year than 2020. It also seems like consumers are just starving for stability. 28% of people actually said they're more excited about the presidential inauguration than the Super Bowl. So, Beth Ann, I want to ask you a question. So let's get right into it. How do you think this shift in mindset will change consumers' purchasing behaviors this year? So what are some commerce trends that you predict will take place this year?
Well, I'll highlight 3 areas, but the first is somewhat of a joke, but it's actually based on research, which is we will be buying for the lower half of our body this year. And that makes sense, right? Because there was so much focus on sort of our waist up. And so there will be a desire to go back to thinking about what cool shoes can I get myself? What are some things that I can do to spice up the lower half of my body and hopefully get out in public with some of that on. So something without drawstrings. But in all seriousness, I think there's also that shift, and we're going to hear it from a lot of the people today about mental health and well-being. So no matter what home means to you, it could be even a small micro space. It is making that space into a sanctuary. It's finding ways to continue to create an environment around us that we control, that gives us that kind of safe space. And so we are seeing purchases being made to think about what does that environment look like, whether it's inside your home or outside your home. And again, whatever home means to you. Switching modes from your home back out to the physical world, we're definitely seeing a focus back into physical retail. So whenever you've had a prolonged time, which we could never have anticipated, there's still pent up demand for people to get back out to physical retail. Now, physical retail will be blended much more with digital experience, and brands will have to think about, what does that physical space look like today as the ultimate manifestation of both brand experience and consumer experience. So there's going to be a lot of rethinking and redesign and reimagination of that physical space. And then the last one is the sort of other side of physical, which is we've seen so many new behaviors in the social space, and so much of our time is being spent in social media in new ways, like not social media as we would have thought about it back when it was like traditional social like Facebook, but in terms of thinking about how content is converging now with commerce. And so we're going to see a lot more of a seamless integration of whether it's live streaming or people's haul reports or people's own stories, unboxing stories, demo stories, whatever they might be around purchasing. And so what we're going to see happen is between recommendations, serendipity, the impulse purchase is going to start, that discovery is going to happen more and more on social commerce. And there will be an ease to buy button so that people can move right into purchase mode.
Do you think that we talk about social commerce and we think about, people buying online and how many people actually purchased online this year. Do you think that it might change the way younger consumers, maybe Gen Z, feel about shopping in store? Do you think there's going to be, the second people have the opportunity to do so, they're just going to, flock to the malls and the stores just to get that in-person experience at long last?
Yeah, I think that it's not going to be an either or. I think it's going to be an and. And actually, we're seeing younger generations, because of community, desire that physical experience too, and they still want the tactile touch. It doesn't mean that the purchase actually happens in store. Remember that showrooming phenomenon a couple of years ago. I think that will come back with more purpose as stores have smaller footprints, smaller number of locations, but use the store environment for the right purposes within their consumer journey. And then buying online as, whether it's utility or function or just what we do for the bulk purchases that we're making, I think that ease of e-commerce will just continue to be part of our lives in a much bigger way.
Makes sense. Thanks, Beth.
I see heads nodding. That makes me feel good. I see the panel.
Yeah. So when I think about a hopeful 2021, I think about the word hope and what that means to me. And I know with everything that took place last year, I'm very hopeful for change to take place in 2021 and onwards. And so, Chana, I have a question for you. So last year, we witnessed a national reckoning on race and a company's role in society. And, consumers care about the products that they're buying. And, with your company, you have the ability to, bring all sorts of companies together and celebrate some of these smaller businesses. And so I'm wondering too, how, when consumers think about buying products, how a company behaves in relation to things that consumers care about, like social justice, is really important. So how have you seen that show up with your company? And furthermore, how can leaders show up in a way that demonstrates integrity, and how do consumers respond to that, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think that what was really interesting about last year and what happened after the George Floyd protest is that you saw, like, once companies decided to step their foot into the social justice arena and, like, showcase what they ostensibly, I guess, really thought were their values, right? Like, a lot of these values are, like, created through, like, D&I work and marketing departments and all this other good stuff. And so, they started to, like, list these things publicly. And then what happened was like the consumer and employer response, which was major backlash, because people were like, there is a disconnect between what it is you're saying and what it is I'm feeling as an employee, or what it is I'm feeling when I walk into your store, when I've been followed in your store, or the everyday experience of being an employee within your company. And so, what I hope that brought up for people was that, this is the moment there was always a moment to operate in integrity. But for a long time in the marketing world, we've been talking so much about authenticity and, like, sort of hitting the right note, like getting the right messaging. But now, like, in the act of integrity is actually, like, how does that message actually travel? Like, what does it look like to have that message align in your actions, in your deeds, in the way your employees are treated, in the way consumers are treated? And if there is an alignment between, both your policies and your culture and the statements that you make, then you'll continue to be put on notice by your employees and your consumers. And I think the opportunity here is for larger brands to really look at the work that smaller brands do with the communities that they lead. They're, like, closer to their communities. They're having conversations every day with their communities. And frankly, they can't afford to have a large disconnect between what it is they say and how they act, right? And so, I think the opportunity here is for larger brands to really, decide, like, I have an opportunity to connect with my consumers. I have an opportunity to connect with my employees beyond my messaging, and really just start to operate in integrity.
Absolutely. I almost want to drive that home, because I think that's a really strong takeaway for attendees to walk away with, which is that big brands can learn a lot from these smaller companies by observing how they engage with their communities, how they show up. And I've always believed that. I think that, especially when it comes, it's not easy to start a business. If you make the decision to start a business, like, that's tough. You're putting a lot on the line. It's a lot of risk. And so you're coming from a place of like, at your core, you truly believe that what it is that you are doing is something that needs to exist. And so I think, as a result, you can see that passion, but it's almost wholesome. Like, it's very pure. And I do absolutely agree with that, Chana, that big brands can be learning from that. Thanks for talking about that. I like that authenticity and integrity gap. So, this moves into, something else I want to talk about, because I think the authenticity and integrity gap will show up here as well, especially when thinking about how leaders, are operating companies and how they're showing up in society. So the next topic is mindful mentality. So our research shows that 36% of consumers' top priority is to improve their mental health. And that's no surprise. I mean, we've all been trapped in our homes for a very long period of time, and I drove myself crazy a couple of times. So, 46% hope to spend more time outdoors, and streaming has been a top way to escape for half of the respondents. And so I think this concept of escapism is really interesting. So, Vanita, this one is aimed at you. So, you're building a gym for mental health, which is, launching this month. And evidently the pandemic has affected people very profoundly. And many are taking the initiative to really take care of their mental health. It's coming to the forefront. So what do you foresee companies doing to improve their team's mental health? That's the first question I'll start with.
Yeah, gosh, so much here. But what I would say is, in terms of company culture, there really is a shift. So, Chan, I know that you mentioned there's this piece around integrity now, meaning that I can't, I can't be broadcasting a message of being mentally well if my employees are not also being encouraged to live that life. And so, very much a focus on company culture, but also as part of that, on leaders. So if you're a leader at a company, I got news for you. You're a role model for managing stress and well-being. Teams are going to look to you on what to prioritize. And we know that when leaders are emotionally fit and working on their mental health, they're more likely to cultivate an environment for their team to also be emotionally fit and to be mentally well. So one thing I will say for companies and also for leaders in these companies is to model vulnerability. And what I mean by that is talk about when you've struggled. That all of a sudden makes it now more normal for everyone else to talk about that. If you don't talk about when you struggled, your team's not going to tell you when they're struggling. That might be actually role modeling in more visible ways. So one thing that shows up for COA, for my company, and I know for others, is putting therapy on your calendar. If we put when we're going to the doctors, say when you're going to therapy, that all of a sudden models that for your team. I know a lot of companies in the past year from 2020 started to introduce the idea of mental health days and allowing folks to take those mental health days. But if you as a leader are not taking your mental health days, I got news for you. Your team's also not going to want to take their mental health days. So it's one thing to have it available. It's another to actually model and use it. And even last week with the Capitol riots, Tina was kicking us off with that. There were some leaders who were giving permission to their teams to take the rest of the day off. I was distracted after 12 p.m. basically. So it was like, take the rest of the day off, do what you need to do and take care of yourself. But that's also where I would say feedback culture is wrapped up into this for companies. Do regular check-ins with your employees. Ask them, how could our company be more supportive to you? If your company isn't doing that, but if you're a leader, ask as a leader, how could our team, how could I be more supportive to you? I really encourage companies and leaders to think about emotional fitness as a skill for your team to have, as much as we think about time management as a skill and feedback as a skill. This is also one that you'd want to foster and cultivate for your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say firsthand that, Vanita, that's absolutely true. So we also have mental health days in our company. And I was sitting down with my coach and I was telling her about this and all the great things we're doing for, in mental health. And she goes, oh, really? So how many mental health days have you taken? And I was like, well, I'm very busy, so I can't. And she's like, nope, you have to take them too. She's like, nobody's going to take them if you don't take them. She's like, if anything, you need to tell everyone that you're taking them. And it's really interesting because, like, especially in smaller companies as a founder, there's a certain level of guilt where, it's almost like, you do really have to think about putting that aside and saying, as a leader, I need to show up for my employees and, happy employees and emotionally fit companies, make for better businesses. And so leaders definitely have to focus on that. So I really like that, those concepts.
Just piggyback on that a bit. I think in addition to sort of taking mental health days and being very vocal, I think it's important for us, to the earlier point, to be transparent about vulnerability. I think we're all living through unprecedented times, and there's no playbook on how to build a team, how to scale a company during a pandemic, during a time of great political unrest and sort of, socioeconomic pressure there. And while we're all working remotely in distance for those of us who can still work. And so one of the things I've tried to do is to just be really upfront and say, I don't have it all figured out, and this is going to be flexible, and I need your input. I think that we're seeing more of our teams having to bring their full selves to work. I just mentioned my co-working partner, my 2-year-old, he shows up in Zooms all the time. It's life. We were able to compartmentalize in a way before that just is simply impossible now. And I think now everyone's being forced to bring their full selves to work. And I think for those of us who are leading and trying to scale organizations, it's okay to say you don't have it all figured out right now.
Yep. I totally agree. I think it's like, especially being in our homes, like we're inviting people into our homes with these Zoom calls. And I can think of one call that I did in early December where I had my cat sitting in the background very creepily, just like staring. and just like staring into the camera. People are like, is that a cat? I was like, yes, this is my life. I have creepy cats. Like, this is who I am as a person. It was very interesting, but it's like, we have to, like, we're ourselves. You get to see people's homes, you get to see different things about them, like what, even in the backgrounds. And so I think more of our personalities are showing up, like our home personalities. And I actually think that's a beautiful thing, being able to show up, as you are, but really leaning into it. I totally agree, Ty. Like just leaning into it. I think that will also make for better businesses when people show up as who they are, instead of trying to like abide by these or what we thought were like prescribed, like startup or business, doctrines that we have to participate in. And I'm really hoping that, at least for me, one of my hopes is that, from 2021 onward, we're going to start seeing more human businesses. That for me is my biggest hope. So, I want to shoot over a question to Jacob. So, Gen Z has really, I've noticed that they're a very vocal generation. They have a tendency to kind of put everything to the forefront, even if you kind of look to the type of music that they listen to, the lyrics of Billie Eilish, the way that mental health is often addressed. A lot of these like popular songs, they actually talk about sadness. And so I'm wondering, from your perspective, how do you think Gen Z views mental health, and maybe how do you perceive that to potentially be different from other generations?
Yeah, totally. I think for Gen Z, like, mental health has been I think, or I guess like for Gen Z, I think it's been one of the first generations where like they've just kind of acknowledged mental health as like something that's like not weird, or like there's no really stigma attached to it with Gen Z. And I think, again, like to your point, I mean, there is a lot of these like artists like Billie Eilish, and just a lot of artists or content that just is related, or just like talking about mental health. And so so for them, like, it hasn't really been anything that it was never anything that was like weird or there was a stigma attached to. Whereas I think like in older prior generations, there was more of a stigma attached to it, and they didn't really like talk about it as much. So yeah, I think it's super cool. And just as results, I think like Gen Z is becoming a lot more open about it, and there's like no shame at all in like going to therapy or just exploring options for whatever whatever you might need to kind of like take care of your mental health.
So we got a great little note here from Emma Canfer, I hope I pronounced that well, saying, I think also as a Gen Z too, humor plays a huge part in communicating mental health and boosting awareness. I absolutely love that, because that actually feeds what I was about to talk about. So Emma, I feel like maybe, I don't know, you're psychic. So
I agree, though. I was just reading that too, and I think like, yeah, I mean, I also think like that's done a lot to destigmatize it, because it's just so like, I don't know, self-deprecating in a lot of ways, where it's like someone on Instagram will be like it'll just be like a little like a meme format, and it's like, I don't know, my mental health, and then like something else, like, I don't know, my homework on this and that day. And then it's like you see the meme and you're like, oh, it's like normal. But 100% agree. I think like even on TikTok, there's like so many just like TikToks about mental health, and it's just all self-deprecating, but it's funny.
Yeah, so this is something, Ty, I want to talk to you about, but I 100% agree. I feel like even for myself, humor and comedy have always been a way for me to cope. When I was younger, I did improv. I love comedy and I love humor. And I think throughout history, humor has been a way for us to actually talk about in society difficult topics. So I remember, taking a wit and humor class in college, and that came up, and I remember learning that. And I think it's very true, the way that we've joked about certain things this year, some of these TikToks, like Jake mentioned, of being at home, and, people getting very creative and joking about these things that everyone can relate to. And, I think it can be very therapeutic. So, Ty, I'm wondering, what's the role of comedy in sort of mental health and dealing with some of these challenging issues, especially, with the pandemic?
Absolutely. We recently did at Laugh Out Loud. We announced in November a partnership with Headspace, where we're creating content both for the Headspace app, and also we're creating content in partnership with them that we're distributing across our LOL network. And for us, at the core of our mission has always been about keeping the world laughing together, right? It doesn't mean it's always feel good comedy, but there is this huge relief and a ton of research about the sort of personal, sort of communal, and then of course the commercial impact of comedy. And so, during this time, we found it more important than ever to try to figure out a way to get content out there, even when, production becomes more challenging in a COVID context. But to your point earlier about escapism, it's really, really, really important to have, an off valve during these times. And also, we've leaned in heavily, not just with Headspace, but also with Snapchat. We did a series with them a little bit earlier called Coach Kev that was all about motivational, daily kind of get up and go, let's keep moving, let's look on the bright side, because, as you've quoted earlier, so many consumers across demographics are showing real wear and tear that we may not understand the full impact of until much later. What it's been like to be isolated from people, what it's been like to sort of just be so heavily focused in context. We look at these great moments in time where, whether they're wars or sort of economic depressions, and you think, how did people get through that? It's not without some side effects in the long term. And so we're looking to literally provide comic relief whenever possible.
I love that. I love this, this concept of comic relief. It's something that I can also enjoy. I think what's really interesting too is Emma, you're really on a roll here. She's just weighing in, but she talked about how self-deprecation is really key, and Gen Z is very aware of not making light of issues over people, but turning humor on yourself. And I think that that's a really interesting thing as well, where I do feel like I've noticed this trend in as of late in the last few years, where it really is turning the humor on yourself. And even on I was on the Laugh Out or LL Network's Instagram, and I saw this video of Kevin Hart playing baseball, and he was making fun of himself the whole time because he was trying to pitch fast enough, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get this, and then it was very slow and everyone was kind of laughing at him, and so he turned it on himself, and it was very relatable. And I think it can sometimes be, I think, a lot more comfortable to watch someone make fun of themselves because that it's a choice that they made, versus making fun of someone else and saying, hey, does the other person feel okay with the fact that they're being made fun of? And so I do think
you bring up a good point. And, Kevin, just as a leader and as a, sort of entertainer, has made an interesting choice in his career to always kind of focus on family and his personal experiences, and it sort of jokes on me. And what's interesting about that is just working alongside him, he's one of one of those folks who really practice mental toughness and keeps this sort of always on positive attitude, sort of looking at the bright side of everything. But I think the ability to be able to sort of say, hey, have a laugh on me, the idea that it's the easiest way to dissolve barriers and to make folks feel comfortable, as opposed to this constant perfectionism. Because I think when we look at the, sort of all media consumption is up right now, right? It's funny, people always ask me, what are people viewing now? It's everything, apparently, right? We're just finding more hours in the day, it seems. And when we're spending so much time on social media and we're looking at this sort of culture of perfectionism and curation still, particularly when you can't even get outside, I think that can be, sort of hugely pressuring. So the idea that you can find a space where there's no need to perform, no need to whatever, literally just sit back and unwind. I think that those of us who are providing entertainment experiences, the work that we do, as opposed to just for, pure entertainment consumption, it actually becomes even more important right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's really interesting, Ty, as you were talking, you mentioned, a word that is a topic for us, which is escapism. And so, digging deeper into escapism, which is a form of easing one's mental state, we found that people's top social goal is making new friends this year. So 42% of people say that meeting new people is most important to them in 2021. And so people are hoping to expand their social circle through joining hobby-based groups, so 40%, 33% said career-related groups, and 31% said local neighborhoods. So, one of the things I want to touch upon, it's something that I thought of as, immediately before I dove into this, but, I was thinking a little bit yesterday about this, and just the fact that I feel as though as more people have turned to Zoom, they've realized that there are opportunities to make new friends and, to meet people in a very easy way. It just doesn't feel like you're connecting as much. But I think people have learned, there is an opportunity for me to go out there and make tons of new friends. And I think sometimes, as we get older, I know even for myself, you kind of like fall into a set group and you don't really go outside of it that much. But during the pandemic, I've made all sorts of new friends virtually. And I'm very excited to hang out with everyone once we can. But, I'm curious, and I want to just lob this out to the group first. How do you think that the pandemic, in your personal opinion, has changed the way we think about our friend groups, or change the way we think about maybe networking or showing up or community? Maybe I'll start with Chana, because, I know that community is something that's it's a really important part of what you do, and it shows up a lot. And so I'd be curious to hear your perspectives on that.
Yeah, like as you were talking, like I was thinking about the explosion of Clubhouse and even like Lunch Club. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one, but like Lunch Club enables like just one-on-one conversations around interests. And so it's like, yeah, it's like, actually, I joined Lunch Club before I joined Clubhouse. Like I found out about Lunch Club in May. And what was really cool about Lunch Club is that I felt like it approximated being at a conference and like meeting someone in the hallway and then having a, serendipitous conversation, or being at a bar and talking to someone sitting next to you. And some of these things are kind of missing in a virtual environment. You don't just like kind of happen upon people. Like everything is really like structured. You have your calls with your friends, you have your calls with your family, you have your, your community that you already know. So what's been really interesting is like, the ways in which platforms have thought about utilizing technology to like build new community, and like that can, as best it can, approximate what it feels like to just happen upon a conversation, Yeah. I think both Lunch Club and Clubhouse do that really well, where, you're entering a room, people are chatting. Oh, that sounds interesting to me. Like, I want to join that conversation. And then the more you're part of it, like with both of those platforms, like initially it wasn't as like interest-based. It was more like you're on the platform and you're just randomly chatting with folks. But then now, like, if you've watched the development of both of those platforms over the last year, it's like, well, now we're going to start directing you into your interests, and helping you find people that are most related to you. And then you have these kind of communal conversations around like what you're seeing from your perspective around dating or relationships or makeup and beauty. It's been super surprising to see how big the beauty community, for instance, is on Clubhouse, where normally beauty is a very visual, medium, right? And so if you're on TikTok or if you're on Instagram, you're seeing beauty influencers and content creators, showcasing their skill set. But in a space like Clubhouse, it's more like you're having conversation around the thing, right? Yeah. So our community that we're building, it's really having conversations around beauty. And so we've been using Geneva, which is another like community-based platform. It's sort of like Slack, but then it's like a little bit more visual. You can create little channels around different conversations. But in our case too, in our Geneva home right now, it's like we're creating community around conversations versus like only let me show you myself, let me show you my like video tutorial, and then you watch it and then you comment on my tutorial. Or like, let me have a conversation around what I see going on as it relates to beauty, as it relates to diversity, as it relates to anything that's of interest to me.
Yeah, that's a really good point. it's really interesting because, I've joined Clubhouse too. And I'm not as good with the audio piece. Like I'm one of those people that I need to be in there. My high energy personality, I just need to be in the mix. And so, I try to listen, but I always miss a couple words and I don't feel as engaged despite the fact that there's some pretty riveting conversations on there. But, I thought about this for myself. I realized that my way to connect with people was conferences. So like in 2019, it was just like it was South by, it was Cannes Lions, Shop Talk, like, grocery shop, like all of these, Web Summit, Founders, like all of these different conferences. That was how I filled my social gas tank. And I think I noticed in 2020, I was like, oh my goodness, like I didn't realize how important that was to me. I didn't realize that, because I would come home and I'd always joke that I was a bit of a recluse and a hermit because I would come home and then hermit in my apartment for like 2 weeks until the next conference. And, so Beth, I have a question for you because, I know for myself as a CEO, I think that, I'm sure that you do the same where you're traveling for work. And I'm wondering, how, like, if this is something that has also impacted you, if this is also something that's shown up for you or for any of your employees where, there's definitely been a bit of it feels like we're moving away from that sort of like professional community or that business community or lacking that, that type of connection. And I was wondering if that's showing up for you at all.
Well, first, I mean, there was, you saw all the benefits, all the silver linings of this. Like I was able as a global CEO to jump into Zoom calls all around the world with so much more ease. So I could physically, because we were all moving to camera versus like con calls that you never saw anybody, you could have a more intimate face-to-face experience with a group of people around the world that you probably wouldn't have connected to in that way with that frequency and with that ease. But then you started to quickly realize that we were kind of kidding ourselves a little bit about this, that the, sort of the efficiency and productivity that got a bounce immediately also was really not fully replacing what happens when you're physically able to drop in on people or run into people serendipitously in the hallway or to your points in a conference. So we really had to think hard about like, what are the live experiences, even if they are digital live experiences right now, that allow for that level of connection that's more emotional, more human, and not as much about just jumping into an agenda and being really rigid about getting through the items and then getting off to get to the next one, which is, thoroughly exhausting. We've all experienced. So I think we're all still adapting. And I think the one benefit is we have realized through digital live experience, to your point of some of these new platforms, you can do all kinds of really cool things that do allow for, just like this group here, I feel connected to you and I may never have met you before. Even if we were at a conference together, we may not have felt kind of like a more, true, joint screen connection that's able to happen through this, new media. But I definitely think that, everyone's itching to get back to those physical experiences, and even the flights. Like if you think about what flights meant, to your point about coming into your apartment and just being kind of a bit of a recluse, like my flight time was coveted time for me. Like no one could get you on the plane and you could read or you could get lost in movies and, you could binge one show after another for a 24-hour flight if that's what you were on, and you could also get that kind of unwinding time. And our commute times are missed, like what we used to do during that commuting. Even my observation of human experience, like I used to watch lived experience always on the subway. And I missed that whole data interaction that would just happen naturally because of the way I was sort of, designing my life. So I think, we all are very clear about like what's been gained, what's been lost.
That's a good point. I mean, even the small, sorry, Vanita, you wanted to jump in.
I was going to say one thing to add to that really quickly too, around the stat of folks wanting to make new friends. One thing that we found in our work was any offering we ever have around friendships, they're one of our top attended, and people come to create new community in those actual events. But one thing we learned in them is it's not just about folks wanting to make new friends. That in the last year, they've been in some ways asked to reevaluate the current relationships that they had. And I think with a lot going on in the world, we started to all sort of align on what are my values, what are my beliefs, and started to evaluate and assess our friendships and relationships in that way. And I think it's also created this eagerness for folks to create new relationships in their world.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of that like Drake, Lil Wayne, DJ Khaled song that's like no new friends, no new friends, no. Yeah, so it's like the opposite of that. It's like exclusively new friends. I'm like, that's what I want. But it's interesting because I do feel that we're all, consumers are ready to show up and physically interact again. 35% are hoping to attend physical events once again, and we want to show up as humans. And it's interesting because that word sort of, or that phrase, that concept, showing up as humans, is interesting because it's those subtle moments. It's the time where you say, excuse me to someone, or you hold the door open for a quick second, or someone smiles at you in a coffee shop, or, they say, oh, pardon me, as they're reaching for the sugar. It's like these tiny, tiny moments where we connect as humans that we don't think about and we haven't appreciated, but there are, thousands of them that take place in any given week. And, I'm hoping that we have a greater appreciation for these things as we go back into the real world, and we have a greater appreciation for, the micro moment of, two humans interacting, even if it is seemingly insignificant. So, Jake, I want to ask you a question in relation to, virtual. So, virtual was the hot topic in 2020. So from seeing the power of TikTok, the rise of Zoom, then quickly Zoom fatigue, the resurgence of Omegle, uptick in gaming, and more, how do you think social media and virtual connections will evolve this year? And thinking about things like the tiredness of living digitally, the role of personal identity shifting. And I bring this up just thinking about that in-person connection and those micro moments of connection versus when that happens online, it doesn't have the same magnitude. Someone leaving a comment on my Instagram photo doesn't have that same feeling of connection. So I'm wondering, what you think about that.
Yeah, I think even just towards like the end of last year, we started to see kind of, obviously just like with the rise of like Clubhouse and like Lunch Club, obviously, I think like companies are just like kind of figuring out this gap in the market where, they're kind of like, how do we recreate that serendipity? Because even when I first joined Clubhouse, I was like, oh, wow, this like feels like just like randomly talking to 20 people again. And then one of them is like, hey, I'm interested in like talking more or whatever. And so I think we're going to continue to see like just more of that kind of like evolution of, I'm sure even when all this was happening, I'm sure Omegle probably had like a spike in, users, which is kids being bored at home. I remember House Party was like having a big moment. So I think from now until the time that we like fully go back to normal, I think digital connection just going to evolve more and more, and kids are just going to get more creative. I mean, Instagram's been around for a long time, but I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, I even started to reach out to more people on Instagram after, quarantine, just because I was like just doing a lot more research. And, I have friends that have had massive opportunities off of just like a huge photographer being bored on Instagram and just being like, going down their explore and being like, oh, this person looks like cool to shoot with. But like that wouldn't happen before, because usually if you were like a massive photographer on social media, it'd probably just be like word of mouth or referrals. But now that you're like spending more time on your phone, you're able to discover more people. And that was like the same thing that happened to me. So I think it's going to evolve a lot more until we're kind of like back to normal.
That's interesting, because that sort of brings up this thought of sort of digital and social as a way to create an in-person human experience. So you're saying that like you found, actually, because I just thought of this, I was like, what, I did the same. I caught up with a lot of old friends, and I helped, I was like, hey, we haven't talked in a long time, or I reached out to new people. And then the intention is that, once we are in person again, I'll grab coffee with them, or I'll be able to spend time with them. And so I think that's interesting because, I think, digital social is not going to go away. It's only going to grow. And I almost think that it might, but there might be some evolution to it as, being the precursor to us creating these real in-person experiences, rather than trying to make everything exclusively digital. Because for years we've been talking about like, oh, and the future is going to be exclusively digital. Everyone's going to be at home and everything's going to be tech focused. We did that this year and it kind of sucked. So I don't think that's what's going to happen in the future. So I think that's really interesting. And Ty, I have a question for you. So how has watching, and entertainment trends changed for consumers, So what did we see last year, and what do you think 2021 will look like, just in terms of that content consumption, in terms of how consumers are keeping themselves entertained, et cetera?
Sure. At Laugh Out Loud, we talk about our programming and distribution strategy as comedy and color whenever, wherever our audience wants to laugh, right? And so it's interesting because we've seen upticks across all of those platforms. So, we have a partnership with SiriusXM and Pandora where we distribute our Laugh Out Loud radio channel. And even though folks haven't been in their cars as much, to access satellite radio, we're still seeing huge consumption there because I think people are trying to diversify their in-home sort of like entertainment and media mix, right? Like figuring out how you create some variety, even if your context is sort of constricted. From an AVOD perspective, we have a partnership with NBCU Peacock, but we're also available on Roku and Pluto, and we're seeing, those are some of the fastest growing brands across the landscape right now, regardless of not just media, but there's been a huge discovery of a lot of these sort of like fast channels and AVOD platforms. And then when you look at the, some of the folks who we service content to, like the SVODs of the world, the, Netflix and the like, again, huge, upward mobility and consumption. Now, I'm interested to see the sort of the economic leveling off of all of this, right? Because on the ad supported side, if, for AVOD, as consumers are discovering them, you have to see the same amount of investment by advertisers for companies to see that continue to grow. So we saw this really weird phenomenon like around Q2 where consumption was up, but advertising was down. So there wasn't a direct correlation always between, revenue and consumption. And then when you look at the number of subscription services that consumers are signing up to, I wonder, and this is just anecdotal, I think that we're probably over-indexing on that because of that variety. And so when we get back out in the world, do we level off? And so will there be some sort of casualties or clear winners and losers, in the SVOD market next year? But what I think though, that just sort of like you were saying, we predicted that we would go to, that we wanted was to be completely virtual and to only live through our avatars. We get a taste of that and we realize, okay, there probably needs to be some bridge between IRL and URL. We're not willing to just completely exist in the future.
I love that, IRL and URL. That's so great.
but I think the same exists when it comes to, sort of cord cutting and the idea that like, oh, we're throwing out our TVs. That's not happening right now. Right? But we are curating those content experiences in different ways. And the consumer ultimately has so much more choice right now as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. So we only have 5 minutes left. So, I'd love to ask more questions. I feel like there's so much interesting stuff to talk about here. See, when we told you there'd be a panel of experts, we weren't bluffing. There are definitely there's intelligent people here, and it's been so wonderful hearing from each of you and sort of having you weigh in on every one of these topics. So I'm going to bring Tina back, who said that at the 25-minute mark, I would have to do that. It's now 26 minutes, but thank you all so much for allowing me to be your moderator and for allowing me to moderate this conversation. It's been an absolute privilege to hear you all speak. So thank you, and back to you, Tina.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadia. Oh, and thank you so much to all the panelists for being with us today. Thank you for everyone who is also part of the discussion and decided to spend this hour with us. I see that some people want to invite to Lunch Club and Clubhouse. Reach out to me. I have 2 extra for Clubhouse and unlimited for Lunch Club, so just let me know. One thing that I do really miss is, those like lingering moments after a panel or an event where you get to just like talk to everybody. We don't get those virtually.
I know.
Yeah, so feel free, and I'm also hopefully, speaking for the panelists to reach out to us on LinkedIn, on Twitter, whatever platforms that we're on. Thank you for being here with us today. If you haven't seen the report or downloaded it, it is on berlincameron.com/research. You can download it there. Thank you once again to all panelists and everyone that has contributed to this panel today. And that is it. Hopefully.
Thank you all. Join us next time.
And that's all. Yes. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.